Hello, ladies. Apologies for keeping you waiting tonight. I'm a little bit behind our normal schedule. It is about 7:15 instead of 7. So thank you for hanging out and waiting for me. I love y'all. I see quite a few of you on tonight. I think this can be a really fun, interactive discussion because we are talking about getting started on keto, carnivore, low carb, whatever your brand of low carb is. I cannot believe, once again, this is a masterclass I have not taught yet. There's a reason for that. I'm going to say why I have not taught this topic yet, and why it came up. And I finally decided it's time to talk to the newbies, talk to the beginners, give a roadmap, so to speak, a success path forward. Warning, I will be getting up to refill this water at least once tonight. But all right, real quick, for those who are new here, hi, I'm Coach Nat, the Keto Bikini Pro. That's my bad bicep. There we go. Y'all, even I'm still working on symmetry. Although, you know what? Here's a little trick for you. Whatever's closest to the camera looks larger. So if you want your muscles to look bigger, put them closer to the camera when you're posing. Okay, it's not a posing masterclass though. Tonight is all about nutrition, getting started on your low carb journey, whatever that may look like. So what was really cool was the conversation going on in the Facebook group today. So once again, plug for the Facebook group. If you're not in there yet, Keto Bikini Secrets on Facebook. It is an amazing tribe of women on a fitness and low carb journey. So in there this morning, I posted a question to any newbies. What do you want to know about getting started on your journey? What do you need to help you get started on your journey? And for my vets, because I have a lot of veterans to keto, carnivore, and or low carb, or all of the above and more in the group. So I got amazing comments from the ladies who have been doing this for a while of what they wish they knew when they got started, what they would tell themselves when they were getting started. So I love it. I should be touching on everything that was shared in the group. I may read some of the comments themselves because there were some really great comments in there. The reason that I have not yet done this topic, you'd think it would be the first masterclass I ever did, but it is because in my coaching, when my coaching career was all one-on-one before I even launched the Keto Bikini Academy, for years I worked one-on-one with private clients. And the grand majority of my clients have always been, from day one to now, mostly women who are not new to keto or carnivore or low carb. They had been doing it for a while. They have not been seeing the results they wanted to see, and they wanted to take their journey to the next level. For some of them, that meant adding in training, fitness, exercise, something that they had not been doing. So for many of them, the diet was not new to them, but the fitness aspect, the training aspect was brand new. For others, they've been training, fitness was not new to them, keto was not new to them, but they were still not getting the results they wanted on their keto or carnivore journey. So by results, what do I mean? Y'all come to me for body composition, mostly. I'm not saying that my ladies are not interested in health, because the grand majority of all of us in this space came here for health. We're going to talk about that in a moment. For some aspect of health, gut health, brain health, of course, things like metabolic health, right? Diabetes, heart disease, all of those things. Any aspect of health, hormones, oh my goodness, all the things, right? Adrenals, thyroid, all of that. But what I specialize in is helping you get the body that you want. Slim, fit, toned, tight, all that good stuff. And so a lot of ladies come to me after they've had significant success with weight loss on a low carb diet, but they still don't have that body that they want. They've got a lot of loose skin. They've got a lot of hanging fat on their body. They may still have a lot of fat to lose. They're not there yet as far as even the fat loss side of things, but they're not seeing that body back in the mirror that they want to see. And that's generally what brings people into me. So usually I am not educating on the very first steps you need to take when you're starting a low carb diet. A lot of the time they've been there, done that. Maybe they've fallen off the wagon. You know, they've been off of keto for a while, whether it's been weeks or months or years, and they're coming back to it, but it's still usually not brand new to them. So since I have launched the Academy, our group coaching, and I'm bringing in a larger audience into the Facebook group a couple of years ago, or a year or two ago, had 300 people in it. Now 1,200, I believe, is where we're at right now. More people are finding me. More people are coming into my ecosystem, coming into the tribe. And we've got ladies coming into the Academy who some are brand new to this lifestyle. And so now is the time for me to talk about getting started. So finally, I'm putting this out there. I hope it is wildly helpful for anyone who is just getting started. And even if you've been low carb for a while, but now you're going keto, or you've been keto, but now you're going carnivore, I hope that this helps you regardless of which style of a low carb diet you are starting. But wherever you are starting on one of these low carb ways of eating, that's what we're talking about tonight. So I thought back to when I got started, and there were a lot of things that I did well. And so when I thought back to what were the things that I did well that helped me have success on this journey, that's where I came up with this step-by-step plan. So I'm giving you step-by-step. If I were to do this all over again today for the first time, how would I do it? What would be the very first, second, third, fourth, fifth steps that I would take? So I went back to consider, how did I do it the first time, way back 14 plus years ago when I started my journey? And, what were those things I did well, and what were those things I didn't do well? A lot of you who shared in the group, what would I have told myself, or what do I wish I had known? There's a lot of, these were the mistakes I made along the way. And boy, do we learn from mistakes. So I hope for those of you who are newbies that you can learn from our mistakes so that you don't make them yourselves. So we will all pay it forward to you. Like I said, I think this will be a great chat back and forth because I think a lot of you will relate to a lot of these things. So please feel free to drop in the chat at any given time your experiences, your stories, your thoughts. And of course, if you have any questions about anything that I share tonight, you can ask those questions at any time. And then I may call your comment and put it up on the screen. So thank you for being here with me tonight. Let me real quick acknowledge those who I can see on the chat so far. We've got Diane with us. Jody is on. Deb is on. Celeste is here. Michelle is here. And Emily. Hello, ladies. All right. Anybody else checking in? Drop a comment. Let me know you're here. And this would be interesting. Everybody drop in the chat how long you've been on your journey, and whether you are keto, carnivore, low carb. What would you consider yourself out of those three? What do you consider your not yourself? It's not who you are, right? But it's the way you eat. What would you consider your way of eating out of those three? Or if you want to describe it another way, I've used the term ketovore before because, and that was my girl Nisha Barry used that term to, I think she was the one that coined the term ketovore because it's basically carnivore with a little bit of extras, but it's not all the veg and, all of the things. So maybe you call yourself ketovore. Maybe you call it, I mean, there was a time I was paleo. I would have described my way of eating as paleo or primal. So Michelle says 2 years solid, started keto, went to carnivore, and now ketovore. Sounds a lot like my journey. Celeste started keto in 2016, been meat-based carnivore, ketovore since 2018. We started keto the same year. I started keto in 2016 too. Look at that, twinning. Diane, carnivore 3 years. Awesome. All right. My personal journey started in 2010, 2011. Just cleaning up my diet, kind of going clean eating. And then from there, it evolved into paleo, I believe 2013. And that was the year I did my first 2012 was paleo. 2013, I did my first Whole30. 2014, I did my first gut healing protocol, the GAPS protocol. And then from there, 2016 was when I went keto. 2021, when I met Bronson, was when I went carnivore. And then I settled back into a ketovore with cyclical higher carb seasons, if you will. So I have my seasons where I go into a more cyclical ketogenic diet, where I will have some carbs higher than what would be considered keto levels. But most of the time I would call myself now, I would say my diet is animal-based keto. So mostly ketovore most of the time, mostly carnivore with a few extras. And then I'll have my times of the year where I will add in some carbs. I'm playing with that, considering doing that actually for this next competition prep. I have never played with carbs during a cut, during a fat loss phase. I have only ever done that in an off season or a building phase where I'm eating overall higher everything. So I have more to play with, because my whole purpose for not wanting to eat higher carb is because fats are so incredibly important for human health, and particularly for women's health, that I cannot advocate for a low fat diet. And that is why I've never used carbs during a cut, because when I'm pulling back on how much I'm eating, I want to eat all the fat I can keep in my diet as long as possible. So I don't know. I'm thinking about it, but I'm not sure if I'm going to actually do a carb cycling approach. Maybe at the start of the cut, but not at the end. We'll see. Let's see. Deb Tasker, 9 years total keto for 5-ish years. Oh, awesome, Celeste. I do remember this part of your story. I went keto to get pregnant naturally, tried for 2 years, and then 4 months keto, I got my positive. Stayed keto through pregnancy and ever since. That is freaking awesome. She had a keto baby. That is such a cool phenomenon. This is what I mean when I say fats are so important for women's health. That is a huge, perfect example of why, what eating enough dietary fat can do for women. Incredible. So, okay, now what this masterclass is not, it is not going to be me making the case for why you should be keto or why you should be carnivore or why you should be doing low carb. Maybe that'll be for another day. I've actually never done that class either, because I always say, and I pride myself on the fact that I'm actually not one of those influencers who is here to convince you to do this diet. I am here to help the women who have been trying to reach goals with this diet, a lifestyle, a diet choice, a way of eating that you chose for your own personal reasons, that you want to live this lifestyle and you need help reaching goals, reaching your fitness, your body composition, and your overall optimal wellness goals. So that's what I'm here for. I'm not here to convince anyone. There are lots of amazing channels out there to do that. So let me just make that little disclaimer. Okay, let's dive into the steps. Boop, boop. All right, I've got 5 steps for you that I'm going to lay out the step-by-step plan I would follow if I were starting over today. And this is more along those lines of the what, why, when, how, and who before we get into the practical pro tips, which then I'm going to dive into all of the little tips that kind of go along with some of the process, the steps. But let's dive in first to the 5 first steps. Number 1, write these down. And hey, to any of my ladies who've been on this lifestyle for a while, who might be struggling to stick to it, you keep having a departure or falling off the wagon, as they say, right? I hate that term. You jumped off the wagon, okay? You didn't fall. Anyway, that's for another time. That's for a mindset masterclass. All right. So these 5 steps or questions, essentially they're all questions to ask at the beginning of your journey, to lay out your plan would be great for anyone at any time that just needs a restart or a refresh, okay? So number 1, what are you seeking to achieve with this way of eating? What is attracting you to this way of eating? What do you want to get out of this? If you were, and these are tips that I would give anyone for really any goal. Excuse me, I'm distracted by my windows open here. I'm just going to close some things. Apparently I had a million windows up. Okay, so what is attracting you to this way of eating? What do you want to get out of this? What is the purpose of going keto? Ladies, drop in the chat when you started keto, carnivore, or low carb, whatever. What were you seeking to achieve? What was it about keto, carnivore, low carb that attracted you to the diet? This is really important to get down on paper. What is the purpose? The purpose of doing this? And Celeste shared hers, to get pregnant naturally. So she likely saw a lot of information out there, did some research, and learned, oh my gosh, this is something that I'm struggling with, this fertility journey. And this is something that I can implement that is not a medication and does not require surgeries. And it's changing my diet, right? I love this. This is the stuff that's so key here. Michelle says diabetes reversal. Boom. That's a huge one that brings a lot of ladies in here. Pamela, this is a powerful one. No control with sugar. How many of you ladies can relate to that? You look at a carb and you gain 10 pounds because you just can't stop yourself from eating when you're eating sugar. So all my sugar addicts out there, carb addicts. I love it, Emily. I only wanted to control my type 1 diabetes, but now I'm fitness obsessed and trying for a 6-pack. There is nothing wrong with that, mama. I always say, ladies, it's okay to have vanity goals. That is totally fine. I love it. And it also shows how a lot of the time we get into this for a certain purpose, but then as we implement this lifestyle after months and years, the reason why we're doing it changes. The reason why, the purpose for it changes. So absolutely, that can shift and change over time. And how amazing that we can already see here type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes. This is a way to manage either of those conditions. Deb says, originally lose weight, but quickly realized how much better I was feeling. Whew, a lot of the time. Oh my gosh, that's a massive one. How many people do this just for the weight loss and then discover all of the non-scale victories? Celeste says exactly on the meds front. They were already pushing me to take Clomid I also did genetic testing at the same time and found out about my genetic predisposition to diabetes and found out I was pre-diabetic too. There ain't nothing like a diagnosis, right? To fuel a powerful transformation. So I love it. Look at these beautiful examples. So take these examples and identify for yourself. What is the purpose? Okay. Now, note, I did not ask why yet. I asked what. What are you seeking to achieve? So the first question or the first step is identifying your goal or your goals, plural. What are the goals that you have that have led you to this way of eating? What is attracting you to this way of eating as it relates to your goals? What are you hoping to get out of this? That's where you identify, this is the goal, this is the outcome I am seeking to achieve. And that is the purpose for why I'm doing this. Now, number 2 is where we really get into the why itself. Why keto? Why carnivore? Why low carb? Why paleo? Insert diet choice here. So why do you believe that this diet is the way to achieve your goal? This is incredibly important, y'all. And I'm not even talking about digging down into the 7 levels deep and figuring out your deep inner why here. I'm talking about simply connecting the goal to the diet, right? If, for example, you want to lose weight, there are a million ways you can do that. But let's take a couple examples here. Let's take Pamela's no control with sugar, right? So if Pamela is looking at the slew of diets she could choose from for weight loss, if there's one in there that's promoting high carb, low fat, or everything in moderation, or if it fits your macros, she's going to look at those and go, that's not going to work for me because I am not a moderator, at least not right now. And my main goal, if my main goal is weight loss or fat loss right now, and I'm not in a place where I want to work on becoming a moderator because I have this goal that I'm trying to achieve, then I would love to be on a diet that takes that out of the equation, right? So what you want to do here with the first question and the second question is, or the first step and the second step, is first identify the goal, the purpose, the outcome you're trying to achieve. And number 2, you're connecting the goal with the diet. I'm choosing this way of eating. I'm choosing to eat this way because I believe that this is the best way for me to reach that goal. Essentially what you're doing here is you're getting your own buy-in. So if you had to pitch this diet to a boss, to an authority, to a client, to a buyer, this is where you make the case. And you want to make it a solid case because what's going to happen? Somewhere along your journey, it's going to get hard for you. It's going to get challenging. And if you have not identified, this is my goal, and this is why I believe that this is the way to get there, there needs to be a connection there. And it needs to be a really strong one. So if you cannot currently answer the question, why keto, why carnivore, solidly, if somebody were to ask you, are you ready to defend it? Do you have the words? Do you know what you would say to defend it? Do you have research? Do you have whatever it may be for you? Because everybody's a little bit different. Some of you need proof from experiences of others. Social proof, they call it. Others of you need the scientific studies. Show me where it proves that it can cure my illness. Whatever it may be, bring the receipts so that when you start doubting it down the line, when the going gets rough, you got the receipts and you can say, wait, this is why we chose this. This is why we believe in this. I'm not going to jump ship. I'm not jumping off the wagon because this is the answer for me. Ooh, I like this from Davina. It's the most sustainable and doesn't create ravenous hunger, keeps my energy stable, no more money spent on copious amounts of produce, more money for high quality meat, so many reasons. Oh my gosh, this one, no more bloating. I went 4 months with zero bloating, even on my cycle, until I had alcohol, and that was such a bad mistake. And that maybe we'll add that. I don't think I had that in the mistakes section, so I might have to add the alcohol in there. But there we go. Okay, number 1, what's the purpose? Number 2, why? Why keto? Connected to keto carnivore. You may also use this opportunity in the why section to do something like a 7 levels deep, or even just a 2 or 3 levels deep. Why am I seeking to achieve the goal I laid out? So this is my goal. Why? Why is that my goal? Why do I care about that goal? That's a really key piece too. So we can take number 2, we can take the why into 2 directions. Why this diet? Why do I believe it's best for the goal? Why do I care about this goal? And for my ladies whose goal is weight loss or body composition, and it's not reversing type 2 diabetes, it's not getting pregnant, it's not a major medical or other thing that impacts other areas of your life massively. Now, I will say weight loss and body composition absolutely can impact other areas of your life massively. And they do. And most of the time we're not aware of it. So that's part of what the 7 levels deep helps us understand is what at my core, why at my core do I care about the goal of weight loss or changing my body composition or becoming fit or whatever your goal is? Because you also need to make that deep connection. Why does that matter to me? Okay, so why does your goal matter to you deeply? And why do you believe in this way of eating? Get those 2 things solid before you move to number 3. Number 3 is when. When will you begin? How many of y'all have started over and started over and started over? Or put it off and put it off and put it off? I'm going to start Monday. I'm going to start this day. I'm going to start next month. And it just kept moving. Set your start date. Tell somebody else. Get serious about it. I'm going to start when? And now here's a big question. Do you need an end date? So you're creating a plan here. Here's a question to ask yourself as you're considering what you want to get out of this. Some people, particularly with carnivore, I think carnivore is a perfect example of this because you may do keto, low carb, paleo, whatever, for a health goal, a fitness goal, a body composition goal. A lot of the people who go carnivore, there is something very specific they are trying to work on. And maybe it is an autoimmune condition, controlling an autoimmune flare, getting to the bottom of which foods are causing them problems. So they're truly treating it like an elimination diet. In that case, if that's you, it may be helpful for you to set an end date. And even if not, and I'm going to get into this one in a little bit because somebody shared something really powerful in the group today. Pat, shout out to Pat Dyer. I'm going to read that comment in a little bit. But even if it's a weight loss, a fat loss journey, something that you'll see me talk a lot about is the seasons and how bodybuilders develop these physiques that are so amazing because we're not on a diet 365 days of the year, every year. We're not constantly trying to lose weight. We're not constantly in a deficit. We're not constantly under eating. So even if weight loss is your goal, it may be helpful to have an end date in mind that, hey, I'm committing that I'm going to do this from this date to this date, and I'm giving it a try. Because what that does to the back of your mind when you start embarking on a brand new lifestyle that is completely different to anything you've ever done before, your limbic brain, that survival mechanism back here, It's very emotional. It's not logical. It's not rational at all. Rational thinking is up here. That limbic brain, that emotional brain, is going to start kicking and screaming and coming up with every excuse in the book to not do this, because this is so counter to what we do. It's different. It's scary. I don't want to do it. So what happens when you set an end date, even if you intend to do this for life? But particularly, I think this is so helpful for carnivore, because you could say, okay, I'm going to give carnivore a try. How many of you have done this? I'm going to give carnivore a try for 30 days or 7 days or 90 days or whatever it is, but you set yourself a time frame and you're giving it a try. And what that does is it quiets that emotional brain back here. It doesn't freak out as bad, because it's like, okay, we're just giving it a try. You know, they're not telling me I have to give up all of my favorite high carb foods for the rest of my life. It's just a try. So that's a little trick you can use right there, regardless of what your goal is, to say, hey, I'm giving this a try for X number of days. And then we can decide from there. I'm trying to think back in my journey when I did, there were some times where I did that. So I tried the Whole 30, for example, I mentioned. Back in 2013 was the first time I ever did the Whole 30. And the Whole 30 is a 30-day whole foods, real foods only eating plan. And it was about changing my relationship with food. It was about removing the trigger foods. It was about removing the sugar. It was about removing the desserts, the treats, the snacks, all of that, and just eating whole real food meals. And I knew I was committing to 30 days, so it made it feel more doable. Had I said, I'm going to now eat clean, only real whole food meals, never eat another snack or a treat again for the rest of my life, I probably would have face planted into some donuts or something on day 3, because of all of that screaming that would have been happening from my limbic brain. So, and Michelle, exactly this. I think this is relevant, and a lot of people will relate to this. I did a trial of carnivore for 30 days and ended up doing it a year before changing to ketovore. A lot of the time, that 30-day period, it shows you so many things, like what Davina shared, what Deb shared, about these kind of surprise benefits that you're not even necessarily looking for. Sometimes you are looking for those things, particularly if you're trying to heal your gut or something like that. You're going to be looking for the symptoms that change. But a lot of the time, you're so surprised by how amazing you feel beyond what you expected that you don't want to give it up then. So when will you begin? How long will you do it for? What is your time frame? Okay, number 4, and this is the one when we jump down to the pro tips, the practical pro tips. It's all about the how. How will you be successful? How should you go about getting started in a way that will produce results and keep you from quitting? This is the part where you choose a strategy. You pick a strategy and you make a plan. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. So I'm going to skip past that real quick, and I'm going to jump to number 5, because this is the one that gets overlooked all the time. And I will tell you, a lot of my clients, when they are struggling, particularly with their loved ones and their social lives, this is a big part of it. Number 5 is who. Who will be going with you on your journey or coming along for the ride, whether they want to or not? It is absolutely essential that you communicate with your closest loved ones. And what I mean by that is those who live in your household or pretty darn close to it. You know, does your mother or your mother-in-law live next door and you see them all the time? Your family, your parents or siblings. Who are the people that you see all the time? Who will be with you all the time? And those who have a major impact. You have a major impact on them, and they have a major impact on you in your life. I'm not talking about satellite friends. I'm not talking about that random coworker. The people who are closest to you. You absolutely must communicate with them about your plans. You need to share what you're doing. What is that time frame? All these things we already talked about. What you're seeking to achieve, why you're choosing this way of eating, why it matters to you, why this goal matters to you. And the more vulnerable and emotional you can get when you're sharing these things with your spouse, for example, the better, so that they really understand why this is important to you. Share with them your time frame. When will you begin? How long are you planning to do it? And then you're going to share with them what we're going to talk about next, which is what is your actual plan? How do you plan to be successful? What will you need to do to be successful? Because this is going to impact them, particularly if they're in your household or you get together frequently. So you're going to discuss that with them, and you're not going to talk at them and give them a PowerPoint presentation about what you're doing and this is what's happening, and that's it. It's a discussion because you need to get their buy-in and create a plan together to navigate the challenges that may come up. You need to listen to them and their concerns about how it might impact your relationship, your lifestyle. If it means that it's going to change the dynamic at family meals, or you're going to need their help with certain things, or do they do the grocery shopping? Do you do the grocery shopping? Are there going to be snacks you're no longer bringing into the house? This is the time to have these conversations. Don't wait for it to become a problem and now you're trying to solve it down the line. Okay, so discuss it. All right, so that was the what, why, when, how, and who. Let's now go back to the how and look at some practical pro tips for getting started. So these are straight out of my journey. Ooh, okay, before I dive into all that, let me get that water I talked about. Congratulations to me. I'm about to actually finish my water for the day. Look at that. Boom. Okay. Okay, so here's how I would do it, the hows, if I were starting all over again. First things first, start where you are. Develop awareness of your current eating habits. Take note of where you're starting from. This can look a few different ways. You can write down a typical day of eating. I can't tell you how many people coming into the academy or private coaching, I ask them what a typical day of eating looks like. And it's either no clue because it's all over the place. And then when I ask them about macros, are you currently tracking macros? Do you know how to track macros? If you had to say what your current macros are, what do you think they are? And what they think their macros are and what they're actually eating are completely worlds apart. So before, and the other big thing that always happens with programs and coaches and anything that you sign up for, I always see this desire of like, okay, now give me my food plan. Tell me what to eat. Tell me what my macros should be. And yet there's no starting place. And that was the problem I saw out there in the space too. I would see, and I've worked for companies and I've been coaches at other places that did this. They would just set macros for people or just give them a plan. You could go online and probably buy a keto meal plan. How do you have any idea that that's right for you? It's not designed for you. Even when you're signing up for these programs and they're assigning you macros, if they're assigning you macros without knowing anything about where you're coming from, they're shooting in the dark. They're throwing something out there because they think it's going to be good based on population data or whatever, formulas, algorithms. It's not for you. It's not tailored to you. So one of the tips or comments that a lot of people made was, don't use online calculators to set macros, or just listen to what the influencers are saying about, you don't need to track anything, just eat all the fat and eat until you're stuffed. That's not how I would tell you to start if you want to be successful. I would say first, develop awareness of your current eating habits. So write down what you eat in a day, take pictures of what you eat in a day, and at the end of the day, kind of assess and take a look and say, okay, in that meal, how many carb foods? If you know nothing about macros and you're not a person who wants to start tracking food, which is going to be my next tip, start with just writing down what you eat. You don't even have to know for sure the amounts yet, but just developing that awareness of what you're currently eating is really, really key. If you can write down your meals and at the end of the day say, okay, I had a bagel with breakfast, I had a sandwich for lunch, I had a burger with a bun and fries for dinner. Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 servings of carbs. You could count it up like that in terms of like what a serving is. But start to develop some sort of awareness of where your carbs are now, how many carbs you're eating in a day, and in general, all your food, all your macros. So best way to do this is to use a nutrition tracking app. We like Chronometer. That's our #1 recommended tracking app. It's the most accurate database. But pick a tracking app and don't just get the app for it to tell you what macros to eat. Don't even use it for that purpose at all. Just log your foods and start to get an understanding of your current intake, meaning total calories, just because that gives you like an overall, here's everything you're eating in one number. Then you want to look at your macronutrients. How much protein are you consuming in a day in grams? How many carbs in grams? How many fats in grams, not percentages? My other big tip, practical pro tip for getting started is don't focus on ratios. Don't go to those keto calculators or, every keto guide is going to tell you to eat a certain ratio of your macros. That means you have to calculate calories. You have to figure out where your calories should be according to probably some calculator. And then determine your macronutrients, how much proteins, carbs, and fats you should be eating based on some kind of ratio. That is not the way to go about it. You want to develop your own understanding and awareness of grams, total grams of the food. So how many grams of protein, how many grams of total carbs? That is another big one that I saw in the comments today. Track total carbs. Don't just look at your net carbs. A lot of keto calculators and keto communities will tell you to track net carbs. That means total carbs minus the fiber. But also these days, we have all kinds of sugar substitutes that can call themselves fiber, or they're not even all called fiber, but can be subtracted from total carbs, to give you a net carb number. And that is just not, that's not going to be helpful. It's not going to help you be successful. It's not how your body looks at food. So while there's nothing wrong with looking at the net carbs, if you're using a calculator that gives you that number, the more important thing to look at is total carbs, sugar, and fiber. And if you're having sugar alcohols. Know what you are eating. Everything that comes along with that carb, not just the carb itself. So you can do that when you're using a macro calculator. So that's going to go along with my next tip, which is learning about food. Do some basic nutrition education. Educate yourself about macronutrients. If the term macronutrients means nothing to you right now, Google it. Learn what a protein source, a fat source, and a carb source is. Every list online that you're going to get from every website will show you a list of keto foods. Understand what is carb, what is fat, what is protein. And as I mentioned, this is where you can dig deeper and understand fiber, how much fiber is in the food, how much sugar is in the food, how many sugar alcohols, added sugars, looking at labels and seeing added sugars. So learn about food, learn some basics of nutrition, take note of more than just the net carbs. This is super huge, this next one. Educate yourself on what is in food. Food is an ingredient. It's not an item with ingredients. So foods are single ingredient items. Real food is a single ingredient item. Anything that has ingredients, has a list of ingredients, is not real food. It might be real food with other things added to it. But all the packaged things are pseudo-foods. They're created items using foods, which are ingredients, and usually a bunch of other crap that you've never heard of before. And this, to me, this was the game changer for me in my journey. Way before keto, way before carnivore. It was never about reading a label to see how many carbs was in something. I started looking at ingredients. And I started researching. I was like, what the heck is this stuff? Why are there so many ingredients I can't pronounce? What am I putting in my body? That changed the game for me. And y'all, I meant to share this earlier, but a huge part for me of my why, of why it was important to me to eat clean. I had come back to my faith after some time away, and I had a deeper relationship with God and my body. And I started to see my body as a temple of the Holy Spirit. And all I could think was, I can't treat my body like a garbage can. I started caring what I was putting into this temple because I started looking at it that way. And when I looked at it that way and I saw the ingredients that were in food, I just couldn't justify it. I didn't want to defile my temple in that way. So it was such a deeper purpose for what I was doing than losing some weight and looking a certain way, or even clearing up my skin or improving my mood or any of the other health benefits I got from it. So educate yourself on what is in food, meaning don't just look at the nutrition label with the numbers, look for the ingredients. Become a detective with these ingredients. Do not ever pick up any food with a label on it in a package and buy it without reading the ingredients first. Hard stop. That is the best #1 tip I would give anyone starting this journey over again, regardless of which diet they were choosing to do. Just read the ingredients. All right, taking a step back from there. One of the big mistakes I made, and the thing I would go back and change if I could, and I would do differently if I were starting over, I would identify my poor eating habits, not just the foods, and I would work on my relationship with food from day one. Keto will not save you from your poor eating habits, from your disordered eating, from your binge eating. Carnivore will not save you. The diet can't save you. If you do not deal with why you are binge eating, why you are purging, why you are starving yourself, whatever it may be, whatever your poor eating habits are, the diet will not save you from your habits. The diet will not save you from your mindset. Deal with that stuff at the beginning. Heck, it's possible if I had dealt with that stuff first, I may have never gotten keto. Because maybe I would have just stopped at clean eating, eating real whole foods, and I never would have given a crap about a macronutrient. Who knows? But I didn't, and keto was a part of my journey, and I'm glad it was because I love my lifestyle now, my animal-based lifestyle. Probably never would have ended up here if I were a moderator. So I'm grateful for the journey, but still, I would have dealt with all the things that had nothing to do with food about why I was shoving food into my mouth. Because y'all, it wasn't just about because they were carbs or because it was sugar. And if I remove that, then all of a sudden, all of my problems will go away with food. Those problems were still there, and they did come back after many years being on a low-carb keto diet. So I digress. Okay, so develop awareness about your current eating habits, not just the foods themselves. Get a baseline of your total intake and understand macronutrients. Educate yourself about what is in food. Now, a few other things. Some things that can hold you back that the ladies have shared were their wish I would have known things at the beginning that have to do with the foods themselves. Dairy. Dairy can be a tricky thing. Let's see. Yeah, and Pamela has a good point here. I would still be fighting cravings if it wasn't for Ketovore. So yes, absolutely. Keto, carnivore, even just low carb, depending on what you're coming from and where you're going. Removing sweet taste, and it's usually something that I encourage people to do at the beginning as well. So I guess this would go in the pro tips for beginners, is to remove sweet taste. So not just looking at the carb count, right? Like I was saying about not just looking at the carbs or the numbers on the nutrient label, but looking at the ingredients. But also it can be the ingredients, but the food itself. Is it designed to be a sweet taste, right? Because now there's a ton of things out there on the market that are packaged and processed and labeled as keto or 1 net carb or 0 net carbs. And it's because they're sneaking things into these foods that they can then subtract from the carbs to make it look like it's a 0 carb or a low carb food or a keto food. And those things are not doing anything to help with your cravings. So let's talk about cravings for a moment. A few things that ladies mentioned they would do differently if they had to do all over again. Packaged keto foods is a big one. I'm lucky that those things didn't exist when I started. So that really wasn't even an option for me. Although I will say when I started paleo, none of that really existed. And then I started learning from blogs and things how you can make your own paleo. Oh my gosh, it was like almond butter stuffed, bacon wrapped dates dipped in chocolate. Like I was doing all kinds of, but I was making them myself with all real foods, but it was still sweet and it kept that sweet tooth alive. So absolutely, carnivore in particular can really help with this because a lot of the time when somebody goes keto, they're including things that are super sweet and are replacements for their sugary counterparts. And those things do nothing to help with the physiological sugar cravings. So there will be a physiological desire for the sugar when you first take it out, which we're going to get to in a little bit. We're going to talk about the transition period. Yeah, I don't want to jump down there because I've got a whole other section to talk about. But I'm reading the comments. We got some good comments. Okay. Yeah. All right, cool. Yes. So taking out or committing not to go to the packaged keto foods. Dairy is another big thing. There are casomorphines in dairy, that particularly cheese, that can cause addiction, more cravings, desire for more of that food. So dairy in particular, and I see this as a big problem with people, even carnivore folks who are still binging on their dairy treats. They're making butter bites. They're making cream-based cakes. And I mean, cheesecake is carnivore. Cheesecake can be carnivore. And I see a lot of carnivore cheesecakes out there. So there are people making all kinds of things with cream and cheese and all kinds of dairy, eggs, and boom, they're making all kinds of desserts and sweet treats and keeping that sweet tooth alive and the cravings stay alive. So some of my ladies said that if they could go back and do something different, they would have cut dairy a lot sooner. Because I will tell you, a lot of the ladies who have, it is a very difficult thing for a lot of people to give up. And that's another thing in my journey. I actually did that way before anything else. When I first started my journey, the very first thing I did practically, before I chose any kind of way of eating, because none of these ways of eating had labels or were called anything back then. I just gave up dairy for Lent in 2010. I gave up dairy for Lent. And I got all these benefits from it. My skin cleared up, my mood improved, I lost a little bit of weight. It was just all effortless. And it was probably because a lot of the foods I was eating had dairy in them and they were junk food. So I just stopped eating all this junk food because I wasn't eating dairy. But I wasn't actually trying to go low carb or keto or anything. But the dairy itself can cause inflammation for a lot of people and can cause a lot of stalls. So if you're struggling on your journey and you're not making progress, cutting the dairy is huge. So dairy, packaged keto foods, and bridge foods. Somebody mentioned bridge foods. Making foods at home, like I was talking about when I was paleo, and I would make these these desserts out of real food. But a lot of people start out and just basically take everything they were already eating on a standard American diet, all the junk, and just make it keto, right? Find recipes online for all of their comfort foods, but a keto version. How many people have gone down that rabbit hole and then ended up another 20 pounds heavier? That'll put weight on real fast, because I'll tell you what, as much as I love and will advocate for a high-fat diet over a high-carb diet, when you replace high-carb foods with keto versions, there's a lot more fat. And what does that mean? There's a lot more overall calories. So even though I don't toot the horn of calories all the time, you overeating in general, overall, when it comes to all of your foods, just eating more than what you were eating before is a recipe for putting on body fat. So if you're replacing everything you did before with a keto version, it's very likely you're actually now getting putting more fuel, more energy in your body that you don't need that much. So I'm going to get to the next section, which is all about deciding on the strategy that's right for you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't ever use bridge foods, or you shouldn't ever eat dairy, or you shouldn't ever eat packaged keto foods. Although I will say there's not many packaged keto foods that I will vouch for. To this day, I have not met one that's really something I would consume on any kind of semi-regular basis. The only thing that I would put in that category, I wouldn't call it a packaged keto food. It's a packaged carnivore food, but it is real food, and it is carnivore snacks. It is literally steak dehydrated until it's crispy like chips. So carnivore snacks with the X and carnivore crisps, 100% real meat in a package. So that would probably be the only exception there. Maybe carnivore bar, but even that, it's mostly tallow. So it's super really high fat and very, very hyper palatable, very easy to overconsume. So I look at all those things, even if it is purely all real food, if it's designed to be a snack and it's something you can eat really easily and overdo it, then I would still be cautious about that thing because it's going to keep those habits alive. Remember, at the end of the day, it's about changing the habits, not just swapping out foods. So, okay. That being said, decide on the strategy that's right for you. A couple of the ladies in the group shared, what I wish I knew was that I didn't have to do it overnight. We get into our heads about things, especially when we start a new diet. We're all gung-ho, we're all excited, and we have all this weight to lose. And usually we want to do it in a really fast time frame, which is also a bad idea for success and sustainability long term. But how strict do you want to be? Identify how strict do I want to go and why? Why do I want to go that strict? For Pamela, it sounds like it was very much like certain times in my journey where I need to cut this stuff out. I need to get these things out of my home and I need clean. I need a reset. I need to reset my taste buds. I need to reset my relationship with food. I need to not even entertain these certain foods for a period of time. And for some of you, that works really well. But we also need to be honest with ourselves. For some of you, you've been trying to do it that way because you're an all or nothing person. You identify that way. And then it ends up being nothing more than it ends up being all. Because you keep falling off the wagon every 2 days. If that is you, then I really want you to consider that is not the best way for you. Being strict, if it leads you to crash and burn again and again and again, and you have to keep restarting, then being strict may not be the actual answer for you. It's something you keep telling yourself, but a lot of the time we tell ourselves these things because there's this self-talk underneath there that goes, I can't trust myself. I can't trust myself around. I'm not. And all it is that we are not placing any confidence or belief in ourselves to be able to do it. And we're putting all of the power on something outside of ourselves. I need this other thing to keep me in line. I've done other masterclasses on that, so I'm not going to go there. But all that to say, you really need to be honest with yourself about whether or not baby steps would work better for you than overnight, rip the Band-Aid off, all in, okay? Some people do great with that. Other people need a step-by-step process over time. Like I said, I started with just clean eating. I knew the junk I was eating that needed to go, and I just took the junk out. And then after that, it was like, oh, I learned about paleo. Oh, maybe the grains and the hummus I'm eating all the time are not that great for my gut. Maybe let's try paleo. And then I was introduced to keto, and then I was introduced to carnivore, and it was a stepwise process. And I also tried the Whole30 along the way and the GAPS diet along the way. So there were steps. And I'll tell you my transition, which we're going to get to in a little bit, the transition period into keto, shifting from being a carb burner to being a fat burner was a lot easier for me because I had years of eating paleo, which is not necessarily low carb, but it certainly is a lot lower carb than a standard American diet. And it doesn't include grains and legumes and dairy. So all that part was already out. So for you, you just may need to tackle one thing at a time. And that's totally okay. There's nothing wrong with that at all. The next question is, how fancy do I want to be? I see a lot of ladies diving into the recipes. They want a recipe book, all the keto recipes. And now you've got grocery lists. And now you've got, these complicated recipes with 10 steps and 20 ingredients. And it's exhausting to me to even think about it. So I always recommend when you're getting started on this lifestyle to keep things simple. I have a food matrix. The ladies in the academy can tell you. I keep it up there in our food forum, so it's always a reminder. And I have a guide, a meal planning guide in there. Here's my food matrix. It's columns of lean proteins, fatty proteins, fat sources, veggies, and herbs and seasonings and spices, flavors. Pick one from each column and there's your meal. And you do that for every meal. Simple. You pick a meat, maybe a couple of meat sources, maybe a lean and a fatty meat source to pair together. Maybe you do steak and shrimp. Maybe you do chicken and salmon. Maybe you do ribeye and scallops. I don't know. You pick a couple different proteins. If you're keto or ketovore, you pick a veg or two, a low carb veg or two. You pick your fat source. Maybe you drizzle some olive oil on top. Maybe you're a butter person. Maybe you're using the tallow that you're cooking with. And then you pick a few herbs, spices. My personal favorites, salt, pepper, Redmond real salt. Use my code. Link is below to get 15% off. But Redmond real salt, black pepper, garlic, sometimes some rosemary. If I'm cooking lamb, it's always going to be za'atar, maybe some allspice, cinnamon. So anyway, put your seasonings, you're done. I don't like recipes, but if you're a person who thrives on recipes, and I do have some ladies who absolutely love that, and they have the time and the space and the energy to deal with that, then by all means. But I would say stick to simple meals, like a protein source, a vegetable, a fat source, and there's your meal. And then from time to time, maybe on the weekends or maybe on a special occasion, you pull out a recipe, you do something fun. But all right. Yeah, so pick how fancy you want to be, pick how strict you want to be, and make your strategy. This is my strategy moving forward. All right, we're going to get into the transition period, but I have a question here. Emily says, can doubling up on lean protein for one meal a day instead of one lean and one fatty help with fat loss? It can, depending on where you're at, what your goals are, what your macros are. But I'm not really getting into the weeds on this masterclass about that process. But essentially, I mean, my process for fat loss is you start as high as you can with your macros as high as you can, meaning the highest fat you can consume and maintain. And you keep your protein high. And then as you're cutting, you just slowly cut down on how much fat you're consuming, which actually was another tip. There we go. There we go. I do have a little section on macros, which I already kind of talked about most of these, but don't use online macro calculators. I already mentioned that. But yeah, let's talk about that in a second because I will be talking about macros. I forgot I put that section in here. Okay, so let's talk about the transition period first. So for those just getting started, particularly keto or carnivore. So even if you're going from standard American diet to a low carb diet, you're not going to have a massive transition there, because low carb diets can be anywhere from, I don't know, up to 150 grams of carbs to 100 grams of carbs, and depending on the person, I don't know what they were eating before, but it's unlikely you're going to get like the keto flu symptoms and the transition struggles just by going from standard American diet to low carb. I did not experience any of that when I went paleo because I was still having carbs. It wasn't a significant drop. So the transition period, so for keto carnivore, if you are going from high carb standard American diet or even a low carb lifestyle, and you then purposely are going into a ketogenic or a carnivore diet, you are now dropping your carbs significantly low. So we're talking under 50 total grams, for many people under 30 total grams of carbs, or even lower than that. Carnivore, we're talking negligible, a few grams of carbs from eggs and maybe from certain things, certain meats that might have a gram or two in there. So my carnivores typically don't even get up to 15 total grams of carbs in a day. My keto people anywhere from, I'd say 20 total grams up to maybe 50 total grams. Now for athletes, this can go above that. If you are a hard charging athlete, you could probably eat more carbs up to 75. Sometimes some people can even eat 100 carbs and still be in nutritional ketosis because they're just burning through them that quickly. But the grand majority of people are going to need to be sub 50 grams or sub 30 or 25 grams of total carbs to really drive that nutritional ketosis. So during that process, there's something called the keto flu, which really should be called carb withdrawals, because it's not a flu, but you feel like these flu-like symptoms. And the main things you experience that generally people talk about: headaches, sometimes some muscle cramps or spasms, fatigue, brain fog. It's like this. And what's happening is your body is confused. You took away its energy source. Its energy source was carbs. It was glucose. You're no longer giving it that to fuel itself. Now you're giving it fats to fuel itself, but it doesn't know yet that fat is the fuel source because it was used to having glucose on board. So you have to go through this transition where you're giving it time to, first of all, get rid of the glucose. So that can take some time. Now, depending on how active you are, if you're super athletic, if you're constantly moving, you may move through this keto flu in a few days to 1 week. A lot of time for athletes, it's quick like that, 4 days to maybe a week. For those who are sedentary individuals, have a lot of body fat to lose, are not active, and have metabolic syndrome of any kind, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, any of those metabolic conditions, usually it's going to take longer. So this is the time where a couple of things are key here. Making sure that you have electrolytes on board. So you have sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And nowadays there's about 1 million electrolyte companies to help you out. And I've got a few of them below, including Redmond's Relight, LMNT, and Salty by Keto Chow. All three of those and maybe more are down in the description box below with my codes, so you can get a discount on any of those. But whether or not you buy electrolyte powders or you just salt your food really well and maybe keep some no salt or new salt potassium chloride available, and you get a magnesium supplement either in a capsule or a powder or something, make sure you have sodium, potassium, and magnesium available, because that is what you're going to need to get through those symptoms. So brain fog, headaches, fatigue, muscle cramps, and spasms are usually the textbook keto flu symptoms. Be prepared for those. And when they come, what you're going to need to remind your brain is that you don't need carbs, because I always see this happening. Oh, I need carbs because it's not a sign that you need carbs. It's a sign that you are detoxing from the carbs. It's a withdrawal symptom. You need to stay off the carbs and you need to take some electrolytes, and that should help the symptoms abate. Another thing that can be helpful during this time is testing or tracking your blood glucose and or ketones, especially if you are a person who is doing this to manage your diabetes or insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome. It's even more important for you, because for my athletes out there, you're almost definitely going to be getting into ketosis pretty quickly. But for those who are metabolically unhealthy, it may take longer. And it can be helpful to have something to tell you whether or not it's happening at the beginning. So this is where the ketone urine strips, you're going to be peeing out ketones at the beginning, can be helpful. But after first few weeks after you know you're peeing out ketones, usually you shouldn't be peeing them out, because you want your body to use them. So those urine strips will start getting lighter and lighter, and it'll look like you're not producing ketones. It's just that you're not urinating them anymore. So once you know that you're creating ketones, that's the goal. You want to establish, okay, my body is creating ketones. So you can use the pee strips maybe the first couple weeks. Then you can move on to a ketone blood monitor. And you can get those with the glucose and the blood ketones, which I recommend doing both if you're going to do it at all. It would be helpful to see both your blood sugar and your ketone levels. Do that with the blood. There are also breath meters. I have never personally used the breath meters. Some people really like those. I think that's a lot like the urine strips, though. It's about what you're excreting, whereas the blood is what's circulating in your blood. And then for my ladies, after months and years on this way of eating, your blood ketones are actually going to be lower because your body is utilizing them very efficiently. So they're not going to be hanging around, floating around in the blood either. So after some time, once you know you're sufficiently adapted, it might be weeks or months for some people, that's when, that testing is not so helpful anymore. Okay. Another big key at the beginning is you do need to eat plenty of fat. And one of the big problems, and this gets back to Emily's question, one of the big problems that I see with the ladies who come to me because they've been on keto or carnivore for some time and they're either no longer getting results or they're not getting the results they want. It is because they have been told by every influencer and doctor and guru in the keto space forever that they need to be eating a ton of fat all the time, forever, for the rest of their lives. Eat sticks of butter, eat more fat. Oh, you're not losing fat? Eat more fat. You need to eat more fat. It's always about eating more fat. When you are first transitioning from your body existing on using glucose for fuel to fat for fuel, you do need to make sure there's enough dietary fat coming in that your body knows it has a different fuel source. That is just to train your body to use fat for fuel. Once you have transitioned and adapted, and you are now fat adapted or ketone adapted, and there is a little bit of a difference. And if you want to read about that, I will add to the description below. I have a blog about that. And my new website is launching in a few days now, by the end of this week. So depending on what day you click on that link, you'll either see the old site or the brand new shiny site. I'm excited. So anyway, all that to say, once you have become fat adapted, you don't need to keep shoving more fat in your face. This is where you will end up gaining body fat because there's too much fuel on board. So before you were eating too many carbs, now if you eat too much fat, you can still gain fat on keto. So that's a big misconception and myth in the space. So you won't just poop out fat and it won't ever store as fat on your body. In fact, fatty acids are already in the form of the fat that goes into the cells. So while glucose actually has to be converted to fatty acids to be stored in the cells, fat is already in that form. So it's actually very easy for your body to store fat from dietary fat. So you can overeat fat on keto. Don't believe the hype. That being said, let's see. I saw a comment up here from Angela, CK Carnivore, and Rachel. I've been CV, what is that? Carnivore almost 5 years, and bodybuilding for 2. I'm 57, and the first year I needed high fat to heal, but I stalled for 3 years and only started losing the last 20 after going lower fat. Boom. She said, and only after I found you and Coach Bronson. Yay, I'm glad we can help. Yes, so that gets back to Emily's question. Can doubling up on lean protein for a meal instead of one lean and one fatty help with fat loss? This is now the next step. So after you've gotten through your transition and you're eating high fat, also, which another tip I'm going to give you in the macros section is about prioritizing protein. So as I said earlier, don't use the keto ratios, because another big misconception in the space is that protein will kick you out of ketosis and will ruin your keto, and you can't get fat adapted eating protein. That's not true. So especially for my carnivores, if all you're eating is meat and eggs, you're going to need a steak. That's a lot of protein. You do not need to minimize your protein and jack up your fats to hit a certain ratio. You don't have to do that. So you can keep your protein high and have high fat at the beginning. That's how I recommend starting. And then after you've gotten through the transition, if your focus is on fat loss, then you pull back on how much dietary fat you're consuming, and your body will need to pull the fat from your body, from the fat stores, to release it for energy. And that is how you lose body fat. So the next tip on the macros section, don't use calculators, don't use ratios, prioritize protein, and manage your fat intake. So fat is a lever. Think about it like a lever. When you are wanting to get more energy, to feel better, to heal, to improve your hormones, increase the fat. When fat loss is the goal, body composition is the goal, and you're feeling great, this is not something you should do when you're starving, you're hungry, you're moody, you've been in this diet forever, and you're just cutting fat lower and lower and lower. At some point, it's going to negatively impact your health. So we don't want to just keep cutting fat forever. But that goes to my next point too. So fat is a lever to be used for improvement of energy, mood, all those things, for health, or for fat loss. We pull back on it. Don't diet forever. I mentioned that earlier, that bodybuilders have seasons we go through. We go through building seasons and we go through cutting seasons. We cut when it's time to take the body fat off, but then we build. We bring our intake up. We eat more fat. We eat more food. And we push hard in the gym to build muscle. And then we'll go through another cut when it's time to take some fat off again for a show. And the only reason we do that, by the way, is because we're getting to unsustainably low levels of body fat for our competitions. The average person who is already living at a healthy body fat percentage, you don't need to put body fat on and take it off every year. Let me just make that clear. I think I've said that recently, maybe on my maintenance masterclass, but the goal is not, you don't need to be doing these bulking and cutting phases like bodybuilders. The only reason we do that is because we get so low on body fat that it's not healthy to stay there. So we couldn't just stay stage lean all the time. And that's not what anybody should strive to do. So we have to put on body fat to come back to a healthy baseline in our off seasons, and to have enough energy to push through our workouts to build more muscle, because we're trying for every little bit of improvement every year. So we're always trying to put on more. So that's not going to happen when we're in a totally depleted state, barely surviving on low body fat. So we have to go up and down every year, but you don't have to. You don't have to put on 10, 15, 20 pounds of body fat and take it off every year. In fact, that's incredibly stressful to the body. So I encourage finding that happy maintenance level and staying there for life and getting recomp, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But first, I wanted to pull back and read. There was a comment I wanted to read from Pat earlier. She said, I wish I had known not to go to those macro calculators that had me eating 1,000 calories. I think there was one that put me around 900 calories, and just eat those macros eternally, or until I stalled and then spend years trying to figure out what to do. I wish I had known to just taper down slowly and then cycle back up and do periods of cutting and reversing. In other words, don't do something that will work until it doesn't. Learn how to make this work for life. I love this. And then she goes on to say, when I think about what messed with my head, I think it was the word sustainable. I thought I had to find a way to make those bargain basement macros sustainable. It isn't sustainable, and our bodies were not meant to subsist like that. It isn't a character flaw to be hungry. There's no guilt that should be associated with eating enough food to nourish ourselves. Muscle is king. Don't lose it. Maintain it. Build it. And then, of course, the basics. Eat real food and mind your electrolytes. Pat, I freaking love it. Shout out to you. That gets me to the next point. And she said cutting and reversing, right? So what she means is cutting down and then reversing out of the diet. That does not mean you have to be putting on a bunch of body fat though. So what she didn't say was bulking and cutting. Okay. Now, that brings me to my next point, recomp for life. That is my goal for everyone, is to get to a point that you have done the fat loss. And now you can maintain at a healthy level of intake of food, what she was saying, enough to nourish your body with good proteins, quality proteins, and healthy fats. And then your chosen amount of carbs based on your body's tolerance. And for the newbies, or anybody who's curious, actually, because usually it's the vets who may decide that, hey, I want to start incorporating some carbs back in. And it is completely your choice. That's another thing I want to tell everyone, no matter how long you've been doing this. You do not have to live according to a label. You are not your diet. It is not your identity. Heck, I am known online as the Keto Bikini Pro. The Keto Bikini Body is my brand. The Keto Bikini Academy, right? Everything has keto in the name. But I am not always in nutritional ketosis. I am not always eating a ketogenic diet. I have my carb cycling times. I go carnivore. I don't change my identity to carnivore Natalie and keto Natalie and low carb Natalie and paleo Natalie, because that's not who I am. I'm Coach Nat. I'm Natalie. I am not defined by the diet that I'm following at the moment. And I don't have to feel guilty or explain myself to anyone for choosing the level of carbs I want to eat on a day. Why? Because I am metabolically healthy, I'm fit, I'm living in my ideal body composition, and I get to do those things because my body can handle it and my mind can handle it. And I'm no longer suffering with an eating disorder because I dealt with my shit mentally, as I was talking about earlier, the habits and the mindset. So when you do these things, when you are successful on this journey, you get to maintain effortlessly, and then you get to determine what is my carb tolerance and where do I want to live. Fully based on your health status, your preferences. So, but what is going to make that possible? It's not just the diet. This brings me to the final tip. Do not neglect fitness. Probably half the ladies in the group said if there's one thing they could go back and do differently, they wish they would have started weight training earlier or stuck with it. If they had been lifting, if they had been exercising, if they had been training and they stopped, or they never started until later, they wish they would have done that sooner. If you do not currently have some sort of fitness lifestyle, exercise of choice, preferably resistance training, especially for my ladies over 40, 40s, 50s, 60s, it is incredibly important for us to build our bones, build our muscles, so that we do not become frail and weak in our old age. Especially going through menopause, when we lose that estrogen, it is going to be incredibly important that we have supported our bones and our muscles. So exercise, resistance training, do not neglect it. The thing that will improve your body year over year, not just your nutrition. The thing that will allow you to reverse diet and eat more food than you've ever eaten before in your life and be able to maintain and improve your body by doing that without having to always diet and eat less and eat less and eat less. Training, building muscle on your body. The thing that will help you become more carb sensitive, more insulin sensitive, more carb tolerant, I should say, allow you to be able to eat more carbs without poor consequences. Building muscle. Muscle is the sink for glucose. If you ever want to dream of being able to handle carbs, put muscle on your body. And with that, that's the end of my tips for tonight. I have been talking for an hour and a half. See what happens when I do a getting started masterclass? There's a lot to cover in this thing. So thank you all for being here. Those who are here live with me, Grace, thank you so much. She said, I'm enjoying your informational shorts on YouTube. I appreciate you. I am working with a new editor who is taking some of my former masterclasses and turning them into quick snippets. So if you see more of me on YouTube, as Grace has, that is why. So shout out to my editor. We're going to work on doing some more of that. So there will be more of that coming out soon. All right, ladies, that's it for tonight. I hope this has helped with anyone getting started or restarted on your journey. Or for some of you who just needed kind of that refresher or that reminder. I will see y'all next Monday, and that'll be right before Coach Bronson and I hop on the low carb cruise going to Alaska. I cannot wait. I'm so excited. If you are going to be in Alaska on the low carb cruise with us, drop a comment below. Let me know. I will look out for you on the ship for sure. And then I'll probably have to take a week off of master classes because then we'll be on the ship, I believe, the following Monday. So I will keep you posted about that. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.